And that's how this natural layering concept was born. So let me summarize for you which are the ideal characteristics for the material, the shade, which will replace dentin, natural dentin. First of all, and that has been the biggest contribution of the natural layering concept, is that we moved away from the different basic colors and shades of the Vita system. That we don't struggle anymore with A, B, C, and D shades, because in fact, Mother Nature has not created teeth according to the Vita classical shade guide. So it works, in fact, it works for ceramic restorations, but it doesn't really correspond to Mother Nature. So in fact, we realized that we could very well work with a single hue, a single color. So we have a universal dentin color, but we have a much larger range of chromas. It means we need brighter dentins, which we probably also have now with ceramics, and also we need darker dentins for cervical restorations, to restore teeth of elderly patients, so that we can really match the natural tooth color. We don't need different levels of opacity, as it is provided in many composite systems. We don't need a paisious dentin, or regular dentin, or translucent dentin. We don't even need chromatic enamels. We need a single opacity for each chroma level. Maybe not exactly the same, but that's built in the system. And we need fluorescence. Not more fluorescence. We need the same fluorescence as natural tooth structure. Here you see one example. I'm using that product as a reference product because this is the latest development. It is unfortunately not registered in Taiwan for now, but the registration is in process. I have no idea when that will be completed, but it started thanks to Junji, who has been kind enough to create the contacts here in Taiwan. And you have a large number of dentin shades, and they exist as a restorative material and as a flowable material too. So you have 6 restorative dentins and 7 flowable dentins. They all have exactly the same color, or hue if you like, just a different chroma. So if we were to explain things in a simple way, the amount of pigments is just increasing from I0 to I7. So that shade selection is getting much easier. I'll come back to the shade selection a little bit later eventually. What's about the enamel? In fact, enamel is a lot more complex. It's a more complex substrate compared to dentin. So we could simplify the situation for dentin. We couldn't really simplify so much the situation for enamel, and we had to create a concept which was a little bit different from everything which existed in the past, and we had to create different tints and different translucencies. Enamels are not being categorized according to the value or the brightness. We need to get different tints, because this is actually what we learned by measuring the optical properties of natural enamel. Natural enamel shows a lot of variations, and actually some variations in the color, in the tooth color, which through the classical Vita shading system are being attributed to dentin, in fact are to be attributed to enamel in the reality. So that's why we created a concept which is emulated by Mother Nature, and we try to mimic better Mother Nature. So we have those 3 basic tints: white, neutral, and ivory, different level of translucency, and we need to get a natural opalescence, not more opalescence. Many of the big companies, compounded systems, are not totally correct in this regard. They have too much opalescence, and that makes actually things more difficult. So we have to really fine-tune the amount of opalescence. In the past, composite systems didn't have enough opalescence, so they were not matching to structure very well. We started to be aware of that, and manufacturers maybe went the other way around. They increased the opalescence too much. So here you see the different enamel shades of that specific system: bleach, white, neutral, ivory, transparent. You see here the samples. That's the special shading system, or shade guide actually of the system. You have dentin samples that you can insert inside the enamel ones. So you can simulate the combination of any dentin with any enamel. The objective is that with a minimum number of layers, you can replicate natural teeth. So on the right-hand side, you see a natural tooth that is the replica, and you see it here in reflected light, here in transmitted light, and this compounded tooth has been made of only 2 layers. 1 layer of dentin, 1 layer of enamel. This is the way we expect to be able to build up most of compounded restorations. Here you see with ultraviolet light to show the fluorescence of the compounded. Basically, the compounded tooth shows the same fluorescence as the natural tooth. That's also something which is not totally correct with some compounded systems on the market. Some are over fluorescent, some are under fluorescent, which might be not really ideal. So what we try to achieve is with a simple technique. Here you see a case. We have class 3. I need to reconstruct. It's also a tooth-wear case. I need to reconstruct the inside the ledge. I need to level up inside the ledges. Again, class 4, class 5, class 3, all kind of indications. This was done with only 2 basic layers, enamel and dentin, with no crazy internal characterization. Very, very simple treatment approach that provides optimal color integration. We want the restoration to integrate in a simple way. The class 3, you don't see any transition area, form corrections inside the ledges, everything blends in nicely. But of course, for this, you need to get a material which optical properties are matching those of natural tissues. And that is not the case with the large majority of compounded systems on the market, unfortunately. So which system do we have which should have relatively good optical properties, and that you can use according to this NLC concept? NLC accounts for natural layering concept. On top of the screen, you have the created products. Inspiro, coming soon to Taiwan. Myris 2, I don't know if that was ever sold in Taiwan by Coltin Weldent. It's a Swiss-American company. Mitsurium is an Italian company. System is quite close, even though it is supposed to be used with a more polychromatic, more complex layering, but you can use it with normally the same layering approach. Those are copies of Myris or enamel, Asteria by Tokuyama, Aura by SDI. It's an Australian company. I don't have personally much clinical experience with Aura. Asteria I tried. I think some enamel shades are difficult to use, at least for patients, Caucasian teeth. Maybe that might be more specific to Asian teeth, I'm not sure. Simplified NLC systems, ceramics, Amaris, Essentia. Those systems have less options than the others on top, but they follow the same concept. At least what we can say today is that all new products are going to follow that NLC approach. So for compounded systems, the classical Vita approach is soon over. probably every new composite systems coming on the market will follow the NLC approach. So MyRIS 2 was the first of its kind. It has shown, in fact, the way composites should work. It's easier, it's more predictable, and the aesthetic results are the same, if not better. So, in regard to the number of layers, I really believe what we need is something simple, something reliable, what I said. So you see here on those photo montage, you see the philosophy that we try to apply biluminar approach. One layer for dentine, one layer for enamel. Simple, reliable, and effective. This is what I call realistic dentistry. And it really works. It's not that we need to compromise on the aesthetic outcome. Absolutely not. We want the aesthetic outcome to be not only equal to more complex layering techniques, we even want to have it better, but reliable. And that goes already with the shade selection. If you have a 3 or 4 layer approach, it's getting very difficult to select the color, the shade, and it's getting more difficult to control the shade. So, let's introduce another important concept of the NLC approach. It takes into consideration not only optical dimensions, but also it takes into consideration the morphology of the incisal edge. For young teeth, we go with low chroma dentine, and we go with more opaque enamel or less translucent enamel, like bleach, white, or ivory. Ivory is in fact a warm white enamel. When you build up your incisal edge, you should follow the internal structure of the natural tooth, of a young natural tooth. You should not only think about the color of dentine and the optical properties, the tint and the translucency of the enamel, but you should always try to look for that internal configuration of your build-up. When you go for an adult tooth, and that's especially true for single restorations. If you rebuild the whole smile, then you can decide to change a little bit the configuration. But when you go for a single restoration, you will select the shade according to the tooth age and the tooth type. Probably you go a little bit higher with the chroma. You select enamel, which is a little bit less opaque or more translucent. White, neutral, ivory are the usual enamels that we use for adult teeth, but the relationship between the dentine and enamel might be slightly different. So the incisal edge anatomy of adult teeth is not exactly the same as the one of young patients. So we need to integrate this. And when you get worn teeth or teeth from elderly patients, again, apart from the selection of dentine with a higher chroma and the choice of enamel with a higher translucency, neutral, ivory, eventually transparent, but also the configuration, the anatomy of the incisal edge might be a little different. We need to integrate this into our technique. It's very simple, in fact. But I did it wrong for many years. I was always layering my restorations in the same way for the incisal edge, and eventually I didn't end up with the right aesthetic result. So I need to be a little bit more specific. I'm more specific today in regard to the incisal edge anatomy. I don't know if you have been exposed to some new concepts. There are new concepts to replicate sublayers according to the dentine enamel complex. To go with different shades for primary and secondary dentine, mental dentine, enamel tufts, which is the first layer of enamel, and then the bulk of enamel. We know that actually there are some different areas within the dentine. Primary and secondary dentine doesn't have the same optical characteristics as mental dentine. Those are polarized microscopy sections that I did with Nicol Allensbach and Professor Ols, my mentor, in the early 90s, when I was trying to gain information and knowledge about natural tooth structure. Those are beautiful images. They are not recent images. They are images which are now 20 years, if not more, 20 years old. We have seen all those different areas, but I never found that it would be really useful to replicate all those different layers. You see here glomerular dentine, which is just underneath mental dentine. That area is more translucent, but do we need to replicate this? I'm not sure. We have the dentine enamel junction, the enamel tufts. Well, I think that if we want to replicate some histological features of natural tissues, that will become very, very difficult. You see, even dentine enamel junction is having, those are natural tooth samples which were demineralized. We treated with special chemicals the surface in order to remove the enamel. And now you see the dentine enamel junction, this orange skin appearance. We might think about trying to replicate this, and you can take a micro brush and you tap the surface of the composite, but in fact it doesn't really change much. We had a lot of ideas we wanted to try in order to emulate Mother Nature, even closer, but I think that didn't prove really very useful. So at the end, let's keep it simple, stupid, the KISS principle, and just use two layers. Here you see a tooth where there isn't any big difference within the dentine and within the enamel, because some teeth reveal more differences within each tissue, some other teeth a little bit less. So here I'm just trying to show you the thickness of enamel, and it is important at least to respect the natural tissue thickness. Here we have in the cervical the enamel that will be 0.3 to 0.4. Then in the middle of the tooth it goes to 0.6 to 0.8 millimeters, and at the incisal edge 1.2 to 1.3 millimeters. So rather than to try to create sub-layers, let's stick to the simple bilaminar approach, dentine, enamel, but very important to respect the natural thickness of enamel, because a good NLC composite is normally developed to replicate that thickness, to replicate the thickness of natural tissues, so that you get the best results when you mimic the natural thickness of tissues. You can do a little mistake, a few tenths of a millimeter, but if you put more than 2 millimeters enamel or less than 1 millimeter of enamel on the incisal edge, maybe you don't get the right result. What I said is true for the majority of teeth, but there are some cases where we have extremely complex color configuration. We have some teeth showing, well, the incisal white halo, that's fine because we don't need to do anything special for that. We have some teeth with very strong incisal apaliscent halo. The question is whether we need a special shade for this, or for this. Can I reproduce this warm orange effect, this very intense blue apaliscent halo? Can I replicate this with just 2 layers? The answer is not always. So that's why with the NLC concept, we had to develop some more shades. Also here, you see these fluorosis effects. We have a very special color composition. By chance, we don't need to restore those teeth every day. because that makes everything a little more complicated. But we have what we call effect shades. They are special shades to emulate unusual color configuration. For instance, here you see that's a freehand build-up that I have done with composite. You see here the natural appearance of the enamel. You see the white halo at the edge? It happens spontaneously. If you have the right optical properties of your composite, if you build up the incisal edge with the right anatomy, you don't need to do anything for that. You see here the natural appearance of the composite, and what you can get by using this more intense blue appearance shade. This is to characterize, to create a stronger blue appearance halo. You see it here. We can use some ice shade or white effect shade to emulate white spots or sometimes fluorosis, enamel, hypocalcifications, without exaggeration, of course. And if you want to get stronger mamelon dentin warm effects, you can use, for instance, the chroma with the Myris system, what's called gold, some other call it ochre. Those are normally dentin-like effect shades with a very strong chroma, a high chroma, but that you need to use in very, very small quantity. You see a little bit better with the black background. Okay? So those are special shades that we use from time to time when we need to create more polychromatic effects. So we like to demonstrate with a short video the way we use those effect shades. So this is actually a technique that we train during courses. Here I have an example with two showing a very strong apparent halo, very visible dentin mamelons, and the white halo. And I would like to show you how simple that can be replicated if you have the right composite system. So we'll go now with a short video clip. So that is my model. It's a model, and I'm trying to replicate this color configuration. What we are doing here is a veneer with the composite. So we start first with the dentin. With the dentin, I will use a single layer of dentin. Because for a veneer, you never get large amounts of composite. It's not supposed to be a very thick layer of composite. I will shape the dentin lobes. There are two main lobes for lateral incisor. What I'm doing here, and you have sub-separation of the lobes, which I do here with a finer sculpting instrument, using the micro brush. That's also very helpful to shape the composite, and we like here. Now I need to replicate this blue apparent halo. So I have this blue effect shade that I inject straight over the dentin mamelons. You see, it's only for the incisal edge, so I don't go further cervical. I just pull the composite effect shade. It's a flowable composite. It's not just like resin. It's filled 67%. And the little white spot here, I'm very creative, I move it down here. It was here, I put it here. This is a little bit like a creative work. And now I cover the entire surface with one layer of enamel. It's a warm white, but a little bit translucent. So I use here the shade which is called in that system skin ivory. Checking the profile, very important to control the 3D shape. With veneers, you can use very thin spatulas to shape the composite in the proximal. I don't even use a matrix here. The proximal was shaped by these very fine instruments. Those are actually those U3D instruments. Now I start the finishing. I don't have much, let's say you will see videos for the finishing later on. I'm shaping now the inside of the edge because it's very important to get the white halo. If you create kind of a bevel, you can create this white halo. Now I need to thin a little bit the enamel over the edge of the tooth, and now I'm already with the fine adjustments and polishing. And I think you can see how well it simulates, you see the white halo. Sorry, it goes very fast. It's a very short video clip just to show you. But with a minimum number of shades, basically with just one more step, you can come very close to even complex color configurations. Again, my concept, my idea was really to be as simple as possible, that we do not overcomplicate. Overcomplication is our enemy for everything. Simpler it is, better it will be. Less steps, less mistakes. It is as simple as that, in fact. Now I would like to go quickly through the aesthetic diagnostic and PSD applied to composite restorations. So I'm sure you're quite familiar with that, so I will be able to go a little bit faster. Just wanted to mention that those aesthetic parameters have been well documented in the literature, and I would like to acknowledge the pioneer contribution of some authors, starting with Ronald Goldstein, who has probably published the first comprehensive book on dental aesthetics. We have also a dentist from Geneva that you might have heard from, Claude Ruffenat, and this book, Fundamentals of Aesthetics, has been really one of the first really well-known publications on aesthetics, and that's specifically addressing, this book is specifically addressing aesthetic analysis and aesthetic concepts. And I would like also to mention the book of Pascal and Urs Pelzer and Fritz Kopp and Professor Peter Scherer have formally published this aesthetic guidelines. They were the first one of that type where you had a list of parameters to follow, to analyze, and that's actually the version that you find in the book of Pascal, which is a very good chapter dedicated to aesthetic analysis. And of course, the whole volume of the two books from Mauro Fadeani, which is probably one of the richest source of information, there is a whole volume dedicated to aesthetic analysis. So if you look for some information, I think those books are probably should be your prime reading for the next few months. Now, in regard to dental aesthetics, and I would say especially when it comes to composite restorations, I would like to give you my perspective on the relative contribution of the right brain and the left brain. The left brain is rational, sequential. The right brain is intuitive. It looks at wholes. If you want to do really beautiful composite restorations, which side of your brain should we be using mainly? It depends where you are from. If you are not from Italy, if your grandfather is not named Michelangelo, you better switch off the right brain and use your left brain. Because the best way to mess up completely with the final result is to work with the right brain. Because if you don't have your right brain trained enough, it will infect, it will not guide you well. Instead of creating beautiful composite restoration, you will create a dental potato. Because you will not get the right volume where you want, you will not get the right microanatomy. And that is the problem. Unless we train the right brain intensively, And unless your right brain works really well, Michelangelo had a great power of his right brain, or Bernini, or Michel Magne. Okay, we are dentists, dental technicians, not the best sculptors in the world. Those people don't need to think, they visualize. But if you don't visualize, be analytical, be objective, be sequential. Build up your shape one part after the other. And I will show you during the finishing. It is very important. It is very important. I hope the video will start. Maybe not. I don't know if I can launch the video from here. We'll see if it starts. In fact, it was to say that beauty, well, maybe it doesn't move on. Yeah. Maybe we can make the volume of the video louder. What this professor from Los Angeles is explaining is that beauty is not arbitrary. What is beautiful, what people like, is not arbitrary. Everybody likes the same. And that is relatively well defined by objective criteria. And this is something, and this research is not for dentistry. This research you find in other journals. So in fact, the objective criteria can be used and followed for the large majority of cases. And then very small, fine details that will not make a difference. If you follow objective criteria, you will get good aesthetic results. You don't need to get crazy. You don't need to get Michel Magne doing all your cases. Because Michel cannot do the veneers of the whole world. You just need to follow some sound, healthy aesthetic diagnostic. And everybody likes pretty much the same teeth and the same kind of smile. Visagism, yeah, is just for the very last refinements. But all those criteria are good enough to help us creating beautiful smiles. Facial analysis. Frontal view, I don't need for composite restorations to do a lot of analysis. I will first set my bipupillary line and commissural line, if they are not parallel, will average as my reference horizontal plane. And I will need to align the smile to this parallel, or let's say to this average line in between the eyes and the smile, or the lips, the corner of the lips. I need probably to draw a few vertical lines to see if the smile is symmetrical with the face, although I cannot do a lot of changes with composite restorations. Eventually, if something is totally wrong, maybe we need to think about prosthetic or auto surgical treatment. But I'd just like to know a little bit what happens with the face symmetry. Lateral view, again, if I don't go through auto surgical treatment, in regard to restorations made with composite, the only lines that I want to evaluate is the relationship between the incisor inclination and the occlusal plane. We try to get pretty much 80 to 85 degrees of inclination. If it's more than 90 degrees, we are having a retroclination of incisors, which is not really good. Probably even worse is a proclination of incisor tooth. But that's probably the only lateral analysis I'm doing. Anything else I cannot change with my composite restoration. So I will not do more analysis, I will not go any further. What I'm trying to say now is that we try to be focused for today on composite restorations, on what is possible with composite restorations. Smile analysis. We need to see now if the smile and the smile line is well aligned with the face is one of the first and important aspects. So now I project the cross, which is the facial midline, and now this horizontal plane, which is supposed to be an average between the bipupillary line and the commissural line. We hope that the occlusal plane is well aligned, that we have no shifting or no canting. And then we'll need to evaluate the lip lines, the upper and the lower lip lines, and check if they are in good relationship with the smile line. And also we would like the smile line to be not canted or shifted compared to the midline. So those are a few lines that we want to look at. And last but not least, the corridors. When the patient is smiling, we would like to see a little bit of tooth structure behind the canines. Depends, especially when patients got orthodontics with extraction of premolars, very often it brings all the teeth in, it's changing the curvature of the anterior part of the arch, and we might be missing volume in the corridors. And it's true that when the patient smiles, if you see no volume, you don't see the premolars, it's not really looking very good. But that's, for instance, what I did on this veneer case. We just finished with that case before the coffee break. I used composite to build up volume, to fill up a little bit the corridors. Of course, we cannot add a half centimeter, but composite, for instance, here is very helpful to improve aesthetics. When we make decisions based on photographies, we need to be careful that we position the camera in the proper way. Just wanted to mention that, because otherwise, if you are not in the right position, or if the patient's head is tilted, is rotated, you cannot do any measurement. So it's very important that we get the face of the patient right in front of the camera. The camera is perpendicular to the face of the patient. The patient should not rotate the tooth, bring the chin in or down or up. That is how we can get the most useful photographies. And we need some still photographies to work on. Like if you do a DSD, of course you will use mainly still pictures. A very useful type of picture for doing a DSD is a full face picture with retracted lips but not with closed eyes. Otherwise it's more difficult to evaluate the horizontal plane, and that's actually a good type of picture. So, now I would like to describe in a sequential way all the aesthetic parameters, and I group them. I don't like to just have a list of 12 or 15 parameters because it's a little bit confusing. So I've reorganized, it's nothing new, it's just a different way to present things. I reorganized the aesthetic parameters in groups. So the first two parameters for me are the frame, smile components, upper lip and lower lip. This is what is around the teeth. And I want first to check if that is good, if the lip and the tooth display are in good harmony, keeping into consideration smile dynamics. Because, of course, depending on the type of smile and situation, you see here 4 beautiful models with perfect smiles, with a large smile and forced smile. It's totally different. You have a different vision. You might think that all those models have a goomy smile, maybe this one is having a little bit, but we need to take into consideration smile dynamics. And normally what we like to have as still pictures is pictures during speech, intermediate smile and full smile, or forced smile. With that, I have a good perspective of how much tooth structure, how much tooth display we have. And that's very important for tooth wear patients, for instance, because we need very often to lengthen, to rebuild missing tooth structure. As you know, the tooth display during speech is a little more for women, a little bit less for males, but we like to see 3-4 millimeters of tooth structure in females, a little bit less for males, but definitely when the patient speaks, we should see the teeth. and we will see probably the whole tooth structure when the patient smiles. So we have a lot of defective or abnormal situations. I go very quickly because it is well known. Deep bite will of course expose more tooth structure compared to a normal situation. In case of gummy smile, you cannot even see the incisal edges. You tend to see some soft tissue as well. We can have some patients with flat and incompetent lips, so you always see the teeth even at rest, which is not totally normal. For gummy smile patients, that could be a dental or orthodontic problem, but that could be also related to hypermobility of the upper lip, so the upper lip moves too much. So it's naturally that there is something wrong dentally, but we need to understand that. We can have an open bite, then we don't see the teeth enough. Inverted smile lines, a lot of situations which need to be analyzed, and also to define if this is a dental problem or a non-dental problem, that we do not offer the patient treatments that we cannot provide. For instance, if there is a low lip line with incompetent lip that doesn't move normally, maybe it's not good just to lengthen the teeth. A lot of problems that we might need to consider, including also irregular lip movements or eventually canting of the occlusal plane. This is a quite common feature. This is to be addressed. We can try sometimes with composite to correct that. Tooth square patients showing flat smile line, that's also something which is not very aesthetic. We do a lot of those corrections with composite. And of course, some abnormal lip movements. We have one side which is moving more up or down, and that will create apparently a symmetrical tooth display, but that's not a dental problem, that's a soft tissue problem. So that doesn't require any dental treatment. And sometimes we have combined deficiencies so that the smile looks totally abnormal. And then we need to decide what needs to be done dentally, what needs to be done eventually with Botox or some other treatments to harmonize the lip movement. Because of course, if you have an abnormal lip movement, it is not correct to do a dental treatment. Today, there is a lot of dentists even doing some and we can do some tests with video, all cameras. We try to make the patient laugh. Yeah. And we try to record different positions. But of course, this is not helping us with the DSD. The DSD we do more on still pictures, but the video is a great contribution to the aesthetic diagnostic because we see the full dynamics. We just need to joke a little bit with the patient, trying at least to get some full smile so that we can evolve with proper smile analysis. Now we come to the dentogingival analysis, and we'll try to see what composite can do to improve smiles and how we use those aesthetic parameters to work with composite. Among the different parameters that we need to evaluate for dental problems and soft tissue problems, we have the first group, which is related to soft tissues. I group all the parameters for the soft tissues in the first group. Profile, gingival embrasures, tissue health and color. Is everything okay or not? It is probably something very well known. We are all aware about what should be the ideal gingival profile. We have full closure of the cervical embrasures with the soft tissue. The zenith of gingival profile is slightly more distal, even though it's really an extremely small detail. The zenith of the lateral is lower than the central, then it's going up again. This is the typical configuration that we look for. And sometimes tissue recession might be disturbing. So that is a pre-treatment view. The patient is undergoing orthodontics. It is a 2-square case, as you can see. We have some severe wear of the upper right central. We have also some recession. Here I would say it's maybe more for biological reasons that we need to do some perio-surgery rather than aesthetic problems, because we don't see, at least during a normal smile or speech, we don't see this area. Patient is not so good at hygiene with the orthodontic treatment. Look at the canine on the lower. It's totally gone. So the canine tip is totally gone, so we'll restore the case, increasing the vertical dimension. Here I'm just showing that we did some surgery to realign the soft tissue profile. This is just direct bonding, no preparation, it's totally no prep here. Reconstructed the canine guidance. Those are not porosities, they're just dead pixels in my camera. I did here, in fact, a crown, let's say, cervical coverage with surgical procedures without connective tissue, with connective tissue. Maybe this is slightly undercorrected, but I think I like better this profile here rather than on the canine. The canine not getting shorter. The problem is that with the soft tissue, the connective tissue graft, we had some extra growth of the connective tissue graft, and now I have even a shorter tooth. Well, better this than the other way around, but here we did some surgery next to direct bonding, trying to optimize the best way we could the smile design. I will just maybe come back quickly to the pre-op view to show the. Okay, you see the canines were very short. That one had absolutely no. We had no canine guidance. You see how much the lower canine and the upper canine were worn totally off by 2 square. Now you see that we reconstructed with composite, and look at the nice aesthetic transition. It starts pretty much from here. Here it starts from here. This is already 3 years past treatment. If the patient wears the night guard, if we have a good function, then everything works really well. Okay, let's go towards the smile configuration. The smile configuration brings together parameters which describe, in fact, the whole smile configuration. The tooth axis, position, proportions, and dimensions. Those are among the most important parameters. Next one will be the smile line. So smile configuration, again, is tooth axis, slightly divergent from the central toward the canines. Dimensions. Dimensions are very, very important. And I use these every single day. Those are numbers published by Shu and Okuba in 2008. And if you want to remember only one number, you can remember, in fact, the average width for central incisors, for upper central. Then you know that the lateral is -2, the canine -1, plus -0.5 millimeter. What is important is not too much the absolute width, it's more the relationship with the lateral and the canine. So again, the lateral should be -2, the canine -1 compared to the central. And the range is normally ±0.5 millimeter. The height is a little bit less important, even though we also need to address that for some cases. Laterals are shorter, canines are nearly the height or the same size as centrals. These are generally a little bit smaller for women. In general, we have about 0.5 millimeter reduced diameter for the width, and we have also about 0.5 millimeter for the height. It's not, of course, for every single patient. Proportions depends on the publication. Some publications have shown even or have promoted height width relationship even below 80, like 78% for Shu and Okuba, but it makes the teeth relatively long. Americans like long teeth. Young patients, you can never get 78 or even 80%. You're closer to 85, 90, sometimes even 100%. Height and width, same. It depends really on the age of the patient. Depends also a little bit on our aesthetic perspective, but I personally believe that the gingival anatomy and the normal tooth anatomy, the smile line, the function will define where the incisal edge should be. So the proportions, even though I understand it is important, it's more difficult to stick to those ideal proportions. For the lower arch, we like to get those numbers 5, 5, 6, 6, 5. The difference is only 0.5 millimeter. And as you know, the central incisor is shorter than the lateral or smaller than the lateral. Difference is just 0.5 millimeter. So it goes from centrals to the canines. We have a regular relationship from the central to the canines, each time plus 0.5 millimeter. Normally we have less work to do on the lower teeth, but those references are very useful when you treat a case like this. With us even going deeper with any kind of DSD is also to show you that sometimes we can do things a little bit simpler. Here we are just before the orthodontic treatment started. We have peg-shaped laterals. Those are the permanent laterals. Permanent canines are just erupting now. Patients is around 12. And it has been decided to guide a little bit eruption, to prepare the case for future restorations. Now, patient is basically at the end of the treatment. This is during speech. It's a still picture. Tooth display is correct. Smile line is in good harmony with the lip line. And when you look intraorally, you see here the incisal edges. So the deep bite or the overbite is nearly a deep bite. So here, for instance, I'm not thinking about lengthening the teeth. We don't have really 78% in terms of proportion. Maybe we are 85 or something like this. That's good enough. And when we tell the orthodontist, okay, it's good, you can stop. Now, the main problem I have is just a problem of transversal or lateral space. Dimensions. The smile line is okay, we don't want to lengthen the teeth. Gingival profile, I cannot really change. So, the only thing I need to consider is to correct the situation on this, let's say, on each side of the lateral. I need to close the diastemas between the central and the laterals, and I need to close the distal embrasures, which are too large. So here my problem is more a dimension and a form problem. Of course I can go with the DSD, but here I can do something even simpler, which is just to take a caliper. This is the shade selection. Well, it's coming logically before we start with the treatment. It was just to show you, in fact, the way we proceed with the shade selection. We go with the dentine in the cervical. I come back to that later. And then we combine the dentine with the enamel. And if we get the right match, as you see here, we have a good match, it means the shade will be perfect at the end. It is the beauty of this NLC approach. Well, this shade guide you don't have with a lot of products. You only have it with products from Coltin, Welldent, and Edelweiss. You can have something similar or fabricate your own shade guide eventually if needed. Now to be back to the use of these dimensions or those references and the aesthetic diagnostic. Here, even though again I could use the DSD to treatment plan the case, I think here I just need to report those dimensions with the caliper and to say, okay, now I need 8.5. If I have 8.5 for the central, I will go 6.5, 7.5. Maybe it is not 8.5, maybe here it is 8.7. Then I will go 6.7, 7.7. We try just to respect the relative dimensions. It's relatively simple, and we hope that we haven't made any big mistake when we evaluated the case before brackets were removed. In fact, here we had realized a little too much space, but we tried to do our very best. Create the environment, place the rubber dam, put the ligatures, making sure that we have access to all the surfaces that we want to bond. Use the caliper once again, that will be my reference throughout the treatment. And this is where we stand. So as you see, we have a little more volume here. That's, of course, a case where we did some layering, dentin enamel, but no fancy, we have no affection here. It's just dentin enamel. It's just a photo montage. It's not totally right. It's the way I did the picture, which is not correct. But we haven't lengthened the teeth, in fact. We maintained the existing length of the teeth. Just a little mistake in the position of the camera. If I'm a little bit more above, I will lengthen the teeth, in fact. And that is the result. I had to correct also on the canines here. Here I didn't have to. I had the right space. Here I didn't have the right space. I had to widen. I had to widen the canine on that side. Okay, let's see if it moves. Yeah, this is where we started. This is where we ended up with the composite. We haven't lengthened the central, basically that's the natural edge. We just did a little bit of bonding here in the proximal. Nice blending, and something very simple. Something extremely simple. We had a little more space here, so that's why maybe proportions are not 100%. It's better on the left side. I just, for the left side, used the black and white picture to show that we also have a good, not only a good color blending, but also a good value of the restorations. So that is how we can use those parameters to treat what seems to be a relatively difficult and complex case. And now moving to the next topic, the smile line, of the next group of parameters. Let's maybe just quickly return to those three parameters: incisional embrasures, incisional edge position, interdental contacts. They're all connected to each other. As I'm getting old, I have problems with my memory. So I had to find tricks to remember. So now, instead of having to remember 12 to 15 parameters, I need only to remember 4 groups. The frame, this is the lips. Then the soft tissues, everything which is related to the soft tissues. Then the configuration, the smile line, and I'm done. And I'm trying not to forget something. Incisional embrasures, they exist if the patient doesn't show too much tooth wear. Incisional embrasures are smaller in between the centrals, and then they open up towards distally. Contacts are logically moving up cervical because the embrasures are more open, and of course also because the lateral is shorter. And we have the incisional edge position. And that's something that we want to recreate. That's the best way to rejuvenate the smile, to recreate the embrasures and to recreate the steps between the 3 front teeth. Now, how do we apply this type of concept? And that is the whole smile line. The smile line should have, or should demonstrate, a step, a space in between the laterals. The laterals will not touch the smile line, they are a little bit above. I've seen this patient a couple of years ago. She had an accident. She broke both central incisors, and she was a little bit unhappy about the final result. So I went in the mouth, started to look at the case, and I told the patient, well, I think the color integration is not bad, but we need to repolish, to resurface the restorations. And that could be a first attempt. But in fact, that was not her problem. She didn't really realize that. She didn't pay attention to that. In fact, what she unconsciously understood and realized is that the teeth were too short. Now, if I draw a line, you see that the laterals are pretty much on the same level as the centrals. That's not a young smile anymore. It is an aged smile. So in fact, what we did for this patient was to lengthen the teeth. That is now the new smile line. That is a young smile configuration. This is tooth lengthening just by direct bonding. And the previous restorative work was not so beautiful, not so refined. Now we used a little bit of white and blue effect shades to make those teeth look more vital. But probably the most important contribution for the patient was just to restore the teeth at the right length. But sometimes, honestly, I missed that very important problem at the first moment. Now, if I copy and paste the same lines, you see that we lengthened the teeth nearly 2 millimeters here. Very simple problem, very simple action, but I forgot. I wasn't maybe systematic enough, and that's why now what I'm sharing with you is that I need to be very systematic with my aesthetic analysis, because otherwise I'm just missing some very important things. So that's why actually we need. That's why we need. Oops. That's why we need to be. We need to be careful. And I would like to show you the same kind of problem, maybe in a more advanced case. We have this patient at the end of the orthodontic treatment, and in fact, the case was sent to me when the orthodontic treatment was nearly completed. That was the initial situation with missing lateral and missing central. I don't know if this is the result of an accident or if it's just an aplasia of those teeth, but basically they decided to close the spaces. This is at the end of the treatment. So now we have nearly no overbite, no overjet. We have a lateral instead of a central, which I personally consider very, very difficult. Well, I have a little problem with hypertrophic gingiva. I have no overbite, no guidance on the canines. It's really kind of functional aesthetic nightmare. But the treatment is completed. And now, of course, the patient has a huge expectation in regards to the final smile. So I started with a little bit of gingival surgery. I made a little bit of slicing I sliced a little bit visually the upper canine in order to get something better. And in fact, this is where I stand at the end of my preparation. I probably don't have really totally normal tooth display. It's okay, but not ideal. I need probably to increase a little bit the overbite. The overjet, well, we'll need to increase a little bit in order to create a nicer, get a better axis, tooth axis. As you will see, the teeth are a little bit tilted towards facial. Now I start my DSD. It's probably a little more complex case here. Probably just going with measurements is not enough. So now I do maybe the nose is not totally straight, but I do my analysis with the face, what I believe is the face midline. It's pretty much well aligned with the smile. The occlusal plane is also well aligned with the bipupillary line, which is good. I copy and paste across on the smile picture. I think it's quite good. Again, if I look at the canines, everything looks quite in good harmony with the occlusal plane. Now what I'm not so happy with is the lateral perspective, because, well, the lateral which now is in place of central, is very short, and it's a little bit, the axis is probably a little bit too much facial. It's not, it should be a little bit, it should be maximum vertical, but here it's, you see that the inclination of the front teeth is not ideal. We see it even a little bit better from the other side. We are probably at, I don't know, 95 degrees or so it's not ideal. These tooth is on the contrary, too much in, so some teeth are too much out, some other teeth are too much in. Now you see a little bit better, it's not ideal. So what I will do is to maybe add a little bit of volume cervical, trying to increase a little bit the cervical profile to give the illusion that the teeth have a proper axis. I have also a lot of discoloration from the brackets. So those are some of the considerations. I will repolish, but I haven't yet treated the lower. And now if I copy and paste across, this is where I stand. I have bonded a little bit or used a little bit of flowable material to stabilize the soft tissues. And now I will use that picture to go with my, my DSD. So now I will play with a template. The templates, as I said, could be of two kinds. I can use just a template like an outline. We just have the tooth contours that you can copy and paste, which I do very often because it's a little bit easier to handle than this one. So that's another template I've created. It's a bit of a trick so that you can play with each tooth separate and also to deform the teeth, because of course they have a given shape which maybe doesn't fit with every patient. So you can also do a full adaptation. So basically you need to separate each element, and this is at the end what we found could be possible. It's just another way to illustrate. I start now to play a little bit with transparency to see a little bit for me and for the patient what kind of overbite I can create, and you can even get more transparency to better appreciate the amount of corrections. That kind of view is more important for us than for the patient. Maybe by playing with my template, I made a little mistake. Now you see that maybe I didn't pay attention. This is my mistake. The canine here is not right. I should tip. If the computer will be here, I will do the change in front of you, so you will see how we can do that. But it's probably just that I moved a little bit the tooth. So you need to adapt the template. You need to adapt this kind of template to each patient situation. You can play a little bit with the diameter, of course, with the height, with tilt, the position. You can do whatever you think is needed, and then you decide if this is good or not. Here I send this information to the lab. We are trying now to do sometimes the mock-up. We made two kind of mock-ups here, a freehand with flowable composite and one with a CEREC, because we wanted to do the test drive. In fact, I wasn't sure about the length and the volume. I wanted to test that. Sometimes it works. Here, in fact, the CEREC mock-up was not fitting in very, very well, so I couldn't use. So I used the freehand mock-up in order to check the result. So that's actually my mock-up, my test drive. It looks good, even though you see that in order to get the right smile configuration, I'm having a problem with the premolars. So now, as the patient had really severe financial limitations, I still need to do a little bit more work because I couldn't do the premolars. The premolars, even the first molars, those are the, I'm not sure now if they are missing premolars. Maybe I just need to, no, that is a first molar, and I think this is the first molar too. I need to do some build-up in the corridors anyway. Now, in fact, just to return, I found that the smile line was maybe a little too flat. We discussed with the patient. I decided to slightly lengthen the centrals. So then I modified my mock-up with a little bit of flow, and then I have made an index from that. That is now from a lateral perspective. Maybe the mock-up is not perfectly in place. You see a little bit the problem I have. We have a lot of additional volume in order to be able to place this T-spot. The mock-up was moving a little bit here, so it's not totally in place. It's just during the picture because I didn't want to put my finger into the mouse. But we had to add some volume, so at the end, we'll end up with a lot of material. So that would be nearly like full crowns in composite or facial build-up in composite. Because of the financial limitations here, we still maintain the decision to go with composite. So that would be a nice challenge, technical challenge, to do everything with composite. So again, rubber dam is key to successful extensive adhesive restorations. I will never try to do a case like this without rubber dam. That would be too complicated. I will never be in control of let's say moisture throughout the process. This is my index. You see the original length of the mock-up. This is the new length. So we'll have quite a lot of material to add. If I want to get good visibility of my restorations, now I have removed the composite I had applied to stabilize the tissue. You see the problem. Okay, here I had to slice a little bit mesial, so now I'm into dentine here apparently. But that's the only way to end up with a lateral which has normal dimensions. Go with bonding procedures. Placing the index, building up my lingual shell. Here, for once, even though normally I don't use the index to do too much interproximal shaping, but here I use the index to extend a little bit the palatal build-up into the proximal area. The last part I will need to do, of course, with matrices, but that's giving me, let's say, a good reference. And you can appreciate the fact that if you don't have the reference of the index, such a case becomes very difficult. The DSD, we can decide if we do it or not, but the index, the mock-up, I think, are instrumental to this type of treatment. Apart from that, I will be relatively simple with my build-up technique. When I finish my lingual build-up, then I go with my facial dentine. Build up layer of dentine that way, I put it in the middle, and then I spread on the sides. Here it's already partially shaped. Now this is when I finish the shape. You see the dentine mamelons? They stay about 1, 2, 1, 3 millimeter from the future incisal edge. If you don't have a clear vision of your future incisal edge, that will be extremely complicated. Because if you are too long or too short with your dentine, you will never get the right effect. Here, as she's a young patient, in order to build up a little bit more life into those restorations, I use a little bit of azure, and I paint this with the syringe, with the needle. I go around the mamelons. It's done very, very quickly, and then I build up. Here, as it is a post-ortho case, I'm taking advantage of a unique situation. The teeth are quite mobile. So in order to shape especially the upper left lateral, which now I'm transforming into a central, I will need to play with the emergence profile, and I even use a spatula to shape the emergence profile because the teeth are slightly mobile. You see how much I could separate the teeth, in fact. And that gives me a little bit better chance to get a nice integration here, although my root is much smaller than the real central. This is actually a canine on each side, so I had to resize as much as I could, so a little bit the cervical part of the canines in order to get a better integration. And this is where I stand. This is probably a little too big here. At the end of the first appointment, I will stop because now it's probably 2.5 hours, 3 hours I'm working on the case. I'm tired. The patient, I remember very well, After 2.5 hours, she started to move on the chair like crazy. She was tired too. And normally I do 4 teeth build-up, not more than that. I do quick finishing of the forms before I let the patient go, and she was back the next day. So I was doing 4 teeth on the first day, then I would do the other 2 teeth on the third day. So that is exactly what I planned with my MoCOP. That side was still slightly anesthetized. We have still the problem. I tried to reduce a little bit the volume, but you see we are missing volume. In fact, well, yes, we can see we have only 1 premolar. I will need now to do some bonding. I need to see the patient again. This is where we stand. We have, I think, a quite nice integration. It's relatively shortly after the treatment, but I think it is really a nice case to illustrate how far we can go with direct bonding for young patients. Still, the gingiva is a little bit irritated because it is after removing the rubber dam and doing the finishing. We had to play a little bit with the emergence profile to basically get the overbite, overjet that we need. We made the teeth much brighter in order to improve the smile aesthetics. Those are nearly like a 3/4 crowns with composite, but when we have financial limitations, patient is a young patient, this is what we can achieve with composite. You see that it is brighter than the lower teeth now. The patient approved that we do some bleaching and we do some infiltration of those lesions, maybe micro restorations. Those are canines, so of course here the diameter, the cervical diameter is not ideal, but this is how far we can go with direct bonding when needed. Needless to say that indirect would be probably a little bit easier, but of course the treatment cost would not be the same. This is now the lateral view, trying to create a nice harmony of tooth form, but I think the case that the treatment planning with the orthodontic treatment was not my preferred treatment approach. I would have preferred that we leave some spaces open, eventually go with bonded bridge instead of implants at this age, but we might have been able to end up with a much easier situation. This is actually the MoCOP, DSD driven, and then the final result using natural layering approach. Again, this kind of treatment might be considered not really appropriate depending on the fee system we have in one country or another, but again, I think it is a nice example of the contribution of the smile diagnostic and the DSD, the smile design, also for direct bonding. We apply at the end the same rules as what we apply for, or the rules that we use for a more complex indirect restorations. And as to finish, in fact, the aesthetic diagnostic before basically we were supposed to have a little bit of time for the discussion, but maybe we'll postpone it to after the lunch break. For our clinic, we have this little brochure and we try to explain the patients a few basic, explain the basics of smile design. And we especially tell the patients that the basic elements, those basic parameters I've been discussing up to now, is our job. And in fact, where the patient can interact with us is not to discuss all the parameters I've been reviewing up to now. They can interact with us for the quality parameters. It's not even part of our aesthetic analysis. It is about the color. They want brighter teeth or normal chroma. They want more or less translucency. Do they like a little bit of animation? Let's say what I call the quality parameters. It has nothing to do with the basic aesthetic analysis. The most critical parameters, it is for us. It needs to be left with us in order to avoid making mistakes. The forms, it's more feminine. This is kind of visagism. Rounder forms for the woman patients, a little bit more squarish for males. Do we like micro imperfections, or do we want to have the teeth perfectly aligned, very regular quantity of microtexture? The other patient likes very smooth teeth or a little bit more texture. Those are really little details, what I call quality parameters. This is what the patients have to decide. But for everything else, I did review this morning. This should be normally left with us, so that we are sure that we drive the patient to the right functional and aesthetic result. Then, of course, we discuss the material that we use and the technique that we use according to the treatment cost. So this is what I wanted to share with you. In fact, I'm right on time apart from the discussion, Chunchi, I'm sorry. But maybe we have 5 minutes at least. Thank you so very much for your